Welcome, everybody. I'm Stuart Applebaum. I'm chair of the Democratic Party's Labor Council, and I'm also president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, UFCW. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening for this forum. A major concern for all of us, including the new officers of the DNC, must be the erosion of support from working people, regardless of identity, for the Democratic Party. Last month, we invited the then declared candidates for chair to submit a video weighing in on what they would do to ensure that the Democratic Party becomes the party of working people again. And now we are hosting this forum focusing on the concerns of working people and the labor movement. This week, we are remembering and commemorating the life of our 39th president, Jimmy Carter. When Jimmy Carter accepted the nomination of our party for the presidency, he reminded us in his acceptance speech that our party was built out of the sweatshops of the old Lower East Side, the dark mills of New Hampshire, the blazing hearths of Illinois, the coal mines of Pennsylvania, as well as the hardscrabble farms of the southern coastal plains and the unlimited frontiers of America. The Democratic Party did not create the American labor movement. The American labor movement created the Democratic Party. And without the support of working people and the labor movement, there is no Democratic Party. And it is in the Democratic Party's interest to be supportive and help the labor movement grow. We need political leaders at every level who understand this and who will work to renew and strengthen the alliance between working people and the Democratic Party. We need leaders who will fight for policies that improve working people's lives and strengthen our rights and freedoms. So I'm delighted today that we are about to have this conversation with the individuals who are seeking to lead our party. And I'm delighted that so many of you wanted to listen in as we focus on the concerns of working people and the labor movement, and how the candidates for chair plan to lead the Democratic Party to a winning strategy. I would now like to introduce the vice chair of the Labor Council, International Vice President of the United Steelworkers, my sister and my friend, Roxanne Brown. Roxanne.
Thank you so much, Stuart, my partner in so many things. And good evening, everyone. As Stuart said, my name is Roxanne Brown, and I proudly serve as International Vice President at Large for the United Steelworkers and Vice Chair of the DNC Labor Council. Thank you all for joining us tonight in what I know will be a great, important, and honestly honest discussion. We all know that over the past several years, workers all across this country have been questioning who really has our backs on the issues that matter most to us, and who's going to help secure economic sustainability for me and my family now, and a strong future for my kids and grandkids. Tonight, workers will have the opportunity to ask these questions and others directly to each of the candidates running for chair of the Democratic National Committee. I, like them, am really eager to hear how each of the candidates plan to move the Democratic Party forward in a way that best reflects the values, goals, and fights of working people. I'm excited to get this forum going, so I'm not going to give a long speech because I really, really want to hear from the candidates. And so with that, I'm going to turn this back over to DNC Labor Council Chair, Stuart Applebaum. Stuart?
Thank you, Roxanne. And now it's my honor to introduce the president of the National AFL-CIO, Liz Schuler.
Oh,
Liz.
thank you so much, Stuart. Thank you for your leadership, and to you and Roxanne for really helming the Labor Council and bringing us all together tonight. I know that we have a number of national union presidents here tonight. We have leaders and activists from all across the country. And so thank you for being here. And I just want to thank the entire DNC Labor Council. Because it's such an important voice to have within the party structure, and to use it loudly and proudly. And I want to thank the candidates for being here, because I know that this is a very busy time and we're all watching and excited for tonight. Again, I'm Liz Schuler, president of the AFL-CIO, and many of you know we represent 60 unions. Nearly 13 million workers across the country in every kind of job that you can imagine. Teachers, construction workers, nurses, engineers, postal workers, athletes. A lot of people don't realize that. Actors, the list goes on. The idea here is that we are the voice of American workers, workers who vote Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever it may be. And I can tell you from being on the ground this election cycle, talking to working people all across this country, there was one common thread, no matter where people landed politically, that workers are fed up. They're fed up with a status quo that hasn't worked for them in a long time. And we heard over and over this cycle, no matter what kind of job you did, no matter where you lived, workers were saying, my rent is out of control. Groceries are taking way too much out of my paycheck. I can't afford prescription drugs and, the basic things that I need to live. And at the same time, they're watching the big companies that they work for, the richest people in this country, make billions of dollars hand over fist while they are struggling. So, it's not surprising to hear our members say that they're sick and tired of this system, the system that is broken. And they haven't seen either party doing enough to change it. That is the hard truth. And what I guess gets me so excited about today, and of course, all the candidates who are here with us, is that we have an opportunity in front of us right now to do something differently. As a party, we can look in the mirror. We can get back to our roots, where Democrats are truly invested in and connected to labor and working class people of all backgrounds. And so our challenge to each candidate here today and over the next month is simply tell us how you would do that. What will you actually do to focus on kitchen table issues that really matter to people? Are you going to be someone who gives workers like those here today a seat at the table in shaping the DNC platform instead of CEOs and consultants? Are you going to invest on the ground in our communities and make an effort to reach people year round instead of just the weeks leading into election day? So, and then the last thing I'll say is, do you recognize very fundamentally how central unions are to taking on this broken status quo that we have right now? So it's going to take investments in organizing. It's going to take investments and support for striking workers and using the megaphone of the party to lift up workers taking on powerful companies, and to drive real change. So those are the candidates, the profile that we're looking for. You saw that we put out a sort of statement of values some time ago. This should be the party of working people, and this can be the party of working people. And I'm really excited to hear from the candidates tonight on how they will make that happen. Thank you so much again for being here. Back to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you for your leadership. Now let me describe today's format. We're going to begin with opening remarks from each of the candidates for 2 minutes. Then we're going to follow that with 2 rounds of questions with 90-second answers. After that, there's going to be a series of yes and no questions. We only need yes or no as an answer. And after that, we'll have another 2 rounds of questions with 90-second answers. And then we'll conclude with 1-minute closing remarks from each of the candidates. The response order for each question has been predetermined and randomized. Each candidate's going to be called upon and unmuted before their turn. And as a reminder, this is not a debate style forum. Instead, it's going to be a round robin with each candidate given an opportunity to answer each question. The forum is carefully timed and participants will be held to strict time limits. Time will be kept by a visible countdown clock on the screen that will begin after you've been called on. It is the candidate's responsibility to watch the clock to note the time left. Candidates will be permitted to finish their sentences when their time is up. If necessary, candidates will be muted if they exceed their allotted time, and I certainly hope we don't need to do that. We ask everyone to respect the time limits. Now let's get started. And we're going to begin with the 2-minute opening remarks from each candidate. And first up is James Skoufis. James.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thanks to the Labor Council for hosting this important forum. I know I'm not a household name to many folks watching. I'm not a state party chair. I'm not an operative. I am someone who knows how to win in places like my Trump plus 12 district, where we as National Democrats have stopped winning. I know how to coalition build for a living and speak with voters in the language of labor, not overly academic, overly politically correct terms. I grew up in a union household, proud members of the American Postal Workers Union and National Association of Letter Carriers, and I viscerally believe in the issues you all care for. During my time in public office, I've walked more picket lines than I can keep track of, helped pass pro-worker priorities from paid family leave to funding our public schools, to expanding prevailing wage and the minimum wage, to safe staffing levels in our hospitals. I imagine every candidate in this forum supports the PRO Act and our many federal priorities that have languished. But guess what? None of it matters if we don't start winning again. Talking about it will remain aspirational and theoretical. My winning in a Trump plus 12 district cycle after cycle is not theoretical. I live it. This race for chair is our opportunity to do things differently. You want someone who promotes having just lost his state by just a small margin? Then I'm not your guy. I care about winning, not losing by less. If you want a chair that's going to kick the consultant class to the curb and rebuild the ship from the hull up to the masts with you, someone who's committed to appointing an executive director from organized labor, someone who won't just call you up to be the boots on the ground, but will have you in the room where decisions are made, then I'm your guy, and let's win this race together. Thank you again for this forum, and I look forward to earning your support.
Thank you. Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Labor Council for hosting today's event and inviting each of us an opportunity to come together to discuss the most pressing issues of our time, which are that associated with labor. I'd like to present a quote, and hopefully I won't take too long in doing so. But it's one by Pope John Paul II in a statement he made at the Labor Excerns. He said, "Working men and women aspire to more humane conditions to greater security, to a fair participation in the fruits of their common labor regarding wages, Social Security, and opportunities for cultural and spiritual growth. They want to be treated as free and responsible men and women, able to participate in decisions that affect their lives and future. It is a fundamental right of workers to freely establish organizations to defend and promote their interests and to contribute in a responsible manner to the common good. The Democratic Party is still the party of the common man and woman, period. And forums such as these, labor movement throughout this country, there has always been an underclass of individuals that do the hard work, those in which some of us choose not to even address or discuss. But they are the backbone of this nation. And it's time for us as a party to speak directly to the issues that are directly affecting those that are members of the blue collar community. We also have to be about the business of discussing more why we even need to join labor organizations in the first place. I believe that there is a messaging problem that exists within the Democratic Party that has long been eroded, but it is time for us to step forward and be able to do so. I am a member of the National Education Association. I have been teaching for approximately 2 decades, so I understand the fights that are directly associated with the labor movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Nate Snyder.
My name is Nate Snyder, and I believe our party needs leadership that held a union card and paid dues. Unlike others focusing on fundraising and party experience, I am committed to addressing real concerns of families across America. I grew up in a household where we knew the value of hard work and perseverance. We experienced what it means to improvise when resources are tight, like using the oven for warmth or cutting coupons to save on groceries. But we also saw things improve through dedication. Because of this, I can relate to the struggles that families face, and I understand what it takes to overcome those challenges. My first real exposure to the labor movement was soon after college, during a mayoral race in Syracuse, New York. There I learned firsthand the meaning of solidarity, an unwavering partnership between labor and the Democratic candidates with the focus on fighting for working families. Soon after, I joined SEIU Local 200 United, where I organized janitors, Head Start teachers, and long-term care workers. I helped lead organizing drives that had upwards of 800 workers form their unions. Later, I served SEIU as the national political coordinator. There, I revamped and led the union's member-based program to build political power through contributions. It was responsible for raising over $99 million to support Obama in 2008. I was also a proud member of OPEIU Local 2 and an associate steelworkers member. I have spent my career under Presidents Obama and Biden combating extremism and bringing communities together. I know how to counter the strategies of divisiveness and hate that our opponents employ. The Democratic Party must focus on safeguarding the livelihoods of our voters, working families. That said, we need a generational plan to engage voters consistently, move away from over-reliance on high net worth donors, and adopt modern grassroots organizing strategies. I want to be chair because I want to reimagine the DNC, rebuild our party, and win elections to uplift union families. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Wickler.
Thank you so much, Chair Applebaum, Vice Chair Brown, President Schuler, all the union members here. The fight for working people is the soul of the Democratic Party. And when we don't win working people, we lose elections just like we lost this one. And we need to win back trust from working people if we want a prayer of being able to make a difference in working people's lives. And I'm running for DNC chair because I grew up in Wisconsin, a birthplace of the labor movement, of the cradle of AFSCME. My mom, my grandfather were union members. I marched with my teachers in high school. And in my state, Scott Walker took power and targeted unions with divide and conquer tactics, smashing with Act 10 and then right to work and then repealing prevailing wage, smashing unions as he gerrymandered our state and changed our voting laws in order to ensure that working people would never have a voice. I ran for state party chair here to work with our partners in unions, with our elected officials, with the grassroots to fight back and unrig our state. And year over year, We've been able to flip our state Supreme Court majority, to re-elect Governor Evers, now Tammy Baldwin, to get fair maps, to finally, at long last, win 14 state legislative seats in this last year, and now are on a path to restoring workers' rights and being able to be a pro-worker state as we are in our hearts. And I think we have this kind of fight on a national level. And if we're going to change the trajectory of this country, as a Democratic Party, we need to learn again how to communicate across every platform in ways that actually resonate with working folks across race and ethnicity and gender and geography everywhere in this nation. We need to fight fights that show who we are for working people and against billionaires trying to rig this country for a tiny group of people at the very top. And when we do that, we need to translate our fight into winning elections through year-round grassroots organizing and a war room operation in every state that shows what Republicans are trying to do to working people and how we're going to fight to deliver change in working people's lives. I'd be honored for your support in this race. I'm so excited about tonight's forum, and we need to do this work because this is why we're Democrats in the first place.
Thank you. Jason Paul.
Hello, my name is Jason Paul. I've dedicated my life to this party over the last 20 years. I've done almost everything. I've run for office. I ran a statewide campaign. I probably knocked on 30,000 doors. I could go on. This has always been my fight. And because this has been my fight, I take losing personally, mostly because when we lose, everyone gets hurt, especially workers. I'm running for DNC chair because I think this party needs fundamental change to how we do things. There are some questions in my mind about what we do. For instance, choosing candidates often based on their access to people at the very top is something we shouldn't do. But there are far more questions about how we do it. How do we raise money? How do we run our campaigns efficiently? How and when are we speaking to people? How do high school and colleges work differently as a matter of organizing? I have proposed and will continue to propose the boldest and best ideas in this race. Many are on my website, planallfordnc.com. Here's one. This party needs 10,000 full-time organizers, one for every county in America, and then an additional one for every 50,000 of population. These organizers must be paid a fair wage and benefits. They should commit to doing it for up to 2 years. And they should be someone with strong local roots in the community they are organizing. What that work will look like will be different in places where we do extremely well versus places we do very poorly. The foundation we need. I'm not blind to the logistical and financial challenges this poses, but not having what we need to save democracy because we couldn't figure it out or because we couldn't afford it is not an option. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin O'Malley.
Stuart, thank you very, very much. Stuart, thank you very, very much. Thank you for having this forum. My name is Martin O'Malley. I am running for DNC chair because I love my country, like you. I have served as governor of Maryland. I've served as mayor of Baltimore. I've carried a lot of water for this donkey. And I've also been given the opportunity to work with all of your unions to make real progress for the hardest working people that I've served in my city and state. Fair share legislation, expansion of collective bargaining, the first state in the nation to pass a living wage. But now we are facing Donald Trump and the next 4 years of his trying to undermine so much of the progress that we made under President Obama and President Biden. There is no turning away from this fight. That is why we need a chair who's ready for this fight from day one, and a chair who is a proven change maker. You know, many times on the phone calls with members of the DNC, and many of whom are on this forum, people have said to me, given the flurry of calls they're receiving, they said, just give me three things that distinguish you from the other people in this race. So here's my 3 in 43 seconds. Number one, I am a proven operational turnaround leader. I've done it at every level, city, state, and most recently when President Biden asked me to save Social Security from collapsing in a customer service meltdown in an election year. Secondly, I'm the only one of us that's actually chaired a national committee, the Democratic Governors Association, 3 years of record fundraising, 3 years of expanding our map with wins in places like Montana, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Missouri. And finally, I've knocked on those doors. I've been an elected official. I've learned how to make sure our message, the party's message, always comes back to the kitchen table, the most important place in America. Thank you.
Thank you. Marianne Williamson.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. My relationship to labor began when I was just a little girl. My father used to always tell us about how when he was a little boy, his father had taken him to hear Eugene V. Debs. And then in 1937, my father was a labor organizer for the then CIO when they were trying to unionize the Ford automobile plant in Detroit. And then later, my brother worked for Cesar Chavez in South Texas. My brother and I heard, and my sister heard repeatedly from my father, that we must always be vigilant and that labor must always be the essential defense against assault by unfettered labor. He said that in every generation, we must be vigilant. He used to quote Thomas Jefferson, who said that it is the general tendency of the rich to prey upon the poor. I think my father would be very upset to see what has happened in America today. He would be horrified by the $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1% of Americans. Today, we have a matrix of corporate tyranny. We have corporate powers such as insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big agricultural companies, big chemical companies, gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contractors, and their short-term profit maximization has become the governing principle in the United States. Their short-term profits now supersede safety, health, and well-being for the American people, and they own Washington. And the Democratic Party should be the voice of the voiceless. The Democratic Party, especially given who Trump is bringing in, the billionaires who would be filling his cabinet, what they will be doing in the House and the Senate, the Democratic Party needs to stand strong at the same frequency of emotional and psychological relationship with our electorate that Donald Trump has with his. We must talk to people every single day about what they're doing and what we're doing to stop them in the House, in the Senate, and around the country. If I'm the head of the DNC, we will.
Thank you. Ken Martin.
Well, thank you so much, Stuart, Roxanne, President Schuler, and the DNC Labor Council. First, let me just take a moment to call out the historic signing of the Social Security Fairness Act. Because of all of your work, millions of Americans, from teachers, firefighters, police, and many more, will receive their hard-earned full Social Security benefits. This serves as a reminder to me and all of you about why we do what we do, which is to improve the lives of people and fight for those who deserve to be fought for. For the past 14 years, I've had the privilege of leading Minnesota's Democratic Farmer Labor Party, the only party in the nation that explicitly unites work and family in its names. And for the past 8 years, my colleagues across the country entrusted me to represent our state parties at the national level. In this role, I've traveled throughout the U.S. to stand shoulder to shoulder with labor leaders. I've joined UAW workers on the picket line in Wentzville. I've stood with steel workers in Pittsburgh. I've knocked on doors in all of the battleground states with union members. My roots are deeply embedded in the American labor movement. As one of just a few candidates for DNC chair with firsthand experience as a labor organizer and a card-carrying union member, I proudly identify as a pro-labor progressive. Early in my career, I organized for the Carpenters Union, and I worked with the building trades to lead a prevailing wage campaign. Labor runs through my family's veins. My grandfather was the head of the Letter Carriers Union, my brother is a union carpenter, and my sister worked as a union nurse. Before that, my story began with my mother, who had me as a teenager. By the age of 20, she was raising 4 children and as a single parent, navigating tough times and the challenges of poverty. We spent periods in and out of shelters, confronting the harsh realities of economic struggle. Yet through it all, my family never wavered in our belief in the promise of America. I believe strongly in the power of organized labor to change lives and communities. It's changed my family's lives. When it comes to winning elections, my record in this race is unmatched. If you endorse me for DNC chair, you won't just have a friend of labor, you'll have a union brother sitting in the corner office. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the candidates. We're now going to start our questioning. And I'm going to call on Fred Mary of the International Union of Painter and Allied Trades, and Rose Faust of the United Steelworkers to jointly ask our first question. Fred?
Okay. May everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good evening from Philadelphia. I'm Fred Marai. I'm a member of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, a glazer with Local 252 from District Council 21. I've been a glazer for upwards of 20 years, and I've worked in all aspects of the glazing craft. I work as a general foreman now, and I'm happy to say I'm closing in on retirement soon. I'll be looking at some of the benefits the Democratic Party has fought for as I hit that milestone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rose Faust, calling in tonight from Saxonburg, Pennsylvania. I work in quality control and sorting and packing currently at Duco Ceramics. I'm also the president of the United Steelworkers Local 8042. We're an amalgamated union of about 400 workers who have all kinds of jobs, including people who work in cement plants, graphic places, and even sheriff departments. I've worked for the union for over 18 years, and in that time I've held various leadership roles, working with all different types of union members. I know we're stronger united, but we need to come together to be as strong as possible. That's why tonight Fred would like to ask the candidates. Fred?
After years of eroding support from working people and particularly union members, what structural and operational changes will you make to the DNC so working people will once again see the Democratic Party as their natural home?
We'll start with Marianne Williams.
You know, in running for the chair of the DNC, you're not running for a policy-making position. So I wouldn't get to be in charge of what the policies are of the Democratic Party. I know what I would stand for. We need to raise that minimum wage beyond just federal workers and not let a parliamentarian stop us. We need to actually spend capital on the PRO Act. We need to stand for universal health care. We need to stand for tuition-free college and tech school. We need to stand for an economic bill of rights. And actually, what we need to do in the party itself is practice what we preach. The workers, we need to demonstrate in the DNC the world we wish to see, a world in which workers have a voice. You can liken the various members of the DNC, they are the team members, and yet the real power and the real voice lies with a small group of decision makers. The first thing I would do is to make sure that those days end. That consultancy class, not just the money. It's not just the money, it's the decisions. It's how opaque the budget is. We will, in the party, practice. We will demonstrate that every voice matters. And we will stand for an America in which every single American who goes to work can support their family. I remember the 1970s when the average American could afford a house, the average couple could afford a house and a vacation a year. They could afford for one parent to stay home. They could afford to send their kids to college. That was when we had a thriving middle class. That middle class has been decimated. And when I am the chair of the DNC, if that's to happen, I'll make that so clear that the Democrats are going to change that.
Martin O'Malley.
Thank you. These are the things that we need to do, I believe, from talking to DNC members to change the structure and operations to actually make our party more relevant to the hardest working people who walked away from our party in so many numbers in this last election. Number one, we need to do a much better job of communicating our core central message, which is this, that our economy is not money, it's people. It's all of our people. Our party needs to stand for economic security for everybody out there who's working hard in order to do better by their kids and get ahead, which means that to do that on a year throughout the year, we need to do a better job of using technology, meeting people where they're at online. And that's why I would like for us to create a Center for Digital Communications Excellence so we can speak every day to the economic concerns of our hardest working people. Every time Donald Trump does something that harms and hurts the economic security of the American people, we need to be linking that immediately back with the communications necessary to win hearts and minds. We need to operate this party with greater openness and transparency. And third, we need to measure impact. We need to register people to vote. That is going to be the measure of whether we're truly re-engaging, reconnecting, and rebuilding our party.
James Skoufis.
Thank you. The erosion that we're talking about here is not just an erosion limited to the 2024 election. This is a 45-year in the making erosion since Ronald Reagan was elected at that time. And the simple matter of fact is, we're right on the issues. We're coming off of the most pro-labor presidency in at least a generation. With a capstone of President Biden rejecting the sale of U.S. Steel, walking a picket line, which was historic for President Biden, to passing legislation like the one that we just talked about, enhancing Social Security for the first time in generations. And so we're right on policy, we're right on the issues, we're wrong on messaging. And the simple matter of fact is, in a district like mine that went for Trump by 12 points while I was reelected by 14, time after time, I meet voters who explain to me that the Democratic Party just seems unrelatable today in 2024 and now 2025. And we seem, whether it's real or perceived, more interested in these other issues that are irrelevant to how they're paying the bills. We spent the majority of the past 4 years trying to convince voters the economy was doing well, when in fact they'd go to the supermarket and see for their own two eyes that the prices of milk and meat and bread had doubled from just 4 years ago. So we've got to start being real and authentic with folks again and connecting with people where they are.
Nate Snyder.
Thank you. I think one of the things that goes to this, and I think I have one of the unique perspectives on this, having been in a labor union, having been an organizer and worked with folks on the ground, is it's about showing up. It's about showing up and it's about walking the walk. And sadly, I think as a party, we haven't done that as regularly as we need to be, as we need to do. And we need to look inward. So one of the things I would do operationally is work more closely with the DNC union itself. The fact that folks were getting laid off and the bargaining unit, from what I understand, being mistreated. We can't say that we're the party of working people, and yet we treat our bargaining unit and our staff union not very well. Secondly, I would work more closely with unions to build a stronger partnership, not just on election days. Too many times are we going to unions as a party and saying, help, bail us out, be that ATM, give us the volunteers, have them hit the ground. It's going to be now a partnership to where if you have an organizing drive and you need help, the Democratic Party is going to show up. Further, I would make sure that there are those from the labor movement who are part of DNC leadership, who bring that perspective, who understand what it means to be on the grassroots side of things and what it means to fight for a livelihood. I think only there that we can get increased understanding, better communications, and then actually walk the walk when it comes to true solidarity.
Jason Paul.
So I think I would steal pretty shamelessly from the union movement. The union movement has a process whereby its members pay dues and then get things for those dues and feel respected by paying those dues. But they don't come back and say, oh, well, you paid your dues, but now I need another $10. I need another $5. And bombard them constantly asking for money as the number one relationship factor that people have with their union. If that was the number one factor that people had with their union, people wouldn't want to be in unions very much. That is how the Democratic Party is currently operating. The number one message that the Democratic Party sends, and it's not the DNC, it's not each individual thing, but the number one message the Democratic Party sends through emails, through text, is give me money, give me money, give me money. No one wants to be associated with that. I want to move to a model whereby the 20 million people who are this party, because they either vote in our low turnout primaries or give us money, are treated as partners and sign up for something much more like a subscription model, like union dues, and not sort of a constant bombardment. Once you start to have a funding model that you can sustain on, then you can have an abundance mindset, and we can start funding things like, can we help out with union drives? Can we help out with organizing drives? We need resources, and to get those resources, we have to treat the people who are this party better.
Ken Martin.
Thank you, Stuart. Let me just talk about what we've done in Minnesota that I think we can scale up nationally. One, we've built tables from our coordinated campaign table to our political and comms tables to integrate organized labor into both our electoral planning and our work to build the outside support for legislative agendas on the inside of our Capitol. Two, we worked in partnership with allies, including labor, to develop an economic agenda which focused on the struggles of everyday working class Minnesotans and their obstacles to get ahead. This framework, developed over a decade and called the Minnesota Values Project, led to one of the country's most aggressive pro-labor, pro-worker legislative packages to pass in the last decade or longer. Three, the Minnesota DFL played an important role in ensuring that all of our DFL candidates and elected officials understood, both during elections and most importantly when they are in office, the critical role that unions play in our state. Look, accountability matters. As I've always said, if the DFL isn't supporting working people, then working people, including the unions that represent them, should not support the DFL. Our success as a party is linked to the success of unions and workers. Four, before I was elected as chair in Minnesota, I built all of the soft side infrastructure as the executive director of WIN Minnesota, bringing labor and partner organizations together to focus on how to build long-lasting political power through winning. When I was elected then as chair, I brought the same model to the DFL. Build to win, build to last. In understanding that the party is not just the party activists and leaders, the party includes all of us in the movement, all of us, those of us fighting for economic and social justice, working in partnership with one another.
Ben Wickler.
Thanks so much, Fred and Rose and the painters and steelworkers. The key for me is that unions are strategic partners for the Democratic Party, not just a constituency, not a source of fundraising, not an ally. They're a core partner in the work. And that's what we've done in Wisconsin, in partnership at every phase of our fight. We stand in solidarity with striking and organizing workers in our state. We build our campaign plans and our priorities. We figure out how to navigate legislative sessions together, and we can do this nationwide. And that means regular meetings. If I'm DNC chair, with me and my senior staff, with the DNC Labor Council, with international presidents and political directors, and on the way, all the way down through the staff. That means full-time year-round staffing at the DNC to make sure that the party honors and implements this partnership, follows up, tracks commitments, and follows through. It means a strategy in every state for the 10-year plan for the elections we need to fight and win that unions help to build in partnership with our state parties and Democratic electeds, that we then draft and implement together so we can win elections and deliver the goods for working people. It means working with state parties to recruit candidates from the ranks of labor and to build relationships and accountability with Democratic candidates and staffers to the union movement. And it means critically how we communicate. It means building a national war room that tracks attacks on working people by the Republicans and lifts up the ways that Democrats champion the fight for working people, showing and pitching union members and allies and Democrats who understand how to talk to regular folks to the media so that the fight for working people is at the heart of the story of this era. If we don't change how we communicate, we're going to keep losing. If we do change and we build together at every step, we have the chance to actually win more elections as we have in Wisconsin and then make a difference in working people's lives.
Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
Coming off of the general election in November, the Democratic Party really had an opportunity to shift the direction and tone in which we were going as a party. There was still momentum and enough wind in our backs to really push forward the agenda and be about the business of rebranding the party. I think that was a missed opportunity. The lever should have still been down for us to go out and still do the work in some sorts of campaigning to draw in those that are laborers, those that are part of our various constituencies. I'll say this much too, we are influential to the legislative process. What that can potentially look like is us influencing laws that will be directly implemented and impact the labor unions as well as individuals. That looks like driving down youth unemployment, actually participating in crafting the package to deal with socioeconomic issues in vulnerable and marginalized communities. Yes, I agree with the other panelists when they talk about not just increasing the federal minimum wage, but also creating a sustainable, realistic living wage for all Americans. So if we begin to do the hard work across its 50 states, District of Columbia, U.S. territory strategy to move the entire country forward when it comes to labor rights and advancing socioeconomic equality, we'll be in much better shape.
Thank you. And thank you all. For our second question, I'm going to call on Myra Rivera, whose local is affiliated with both the AFT and the NEA. Myra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Myra Rivera. I'm the Dean of an elementary school in Orlando, Florida, and I've been working in education for over 30 years now. I currently serve our membership of almost 7,500 members as the Vice President of the Orange County Classroom Teachers Association, Local 7448. We represent union members who work across the Orlando school system in all instructional roles as teachers, speech and language therapists, psychologists, social workers, and other roles. Our members are also members of the Florida Educators Association, the American Federation of Teachers, and the National Education Association. I have 12 grandchildren, 7 of whom attend a public school. Our family knows the difference being in a union can bring to a family, and we want to make sure that keeps going for the next generation. We've achieved extraordinary successes during the Biden years, and yet somehow our message didn't get out the way it needed to. What are your plans to change the way the party communicates so that we engage working people and especially young workers? And we'll start off with Jason Paul.
I'm excited to get to go first. I think fundamentally, we need more people doing this work. I think that there's one thing I would say about this campaign for me is that we currently have sort of, I think it was 90,000 people were knocking doors in swing states on the weekend before the election. That's great, but it's a country of 300 million people. And as a country of 300 million people, we need more people talking to their neighbors. We need more people having these conversations, and we need more people having these conversations when it's not an election year. You know, squaring the disconnect between what Biden did for workers and what workers did for how they felt about it is a huge problem that we have as a party that we need to figure out. But to my mind, we can go into we need to replicate what the Republicans do. But the problem is, because the Republicans are much more homogeneous, if we replicate what they do, it doesn't work as well. We need to do things differently. And to me, that means having more people having these conversations all the time. That's why I want my 10,000 organizers, because that gives every 50,000 Democrats someone to talk to if they want to come help. That's why ultimately I want to have 1 million people talking to 200 of their neighbors that they know and learn and come and talk to them, not just at election time, but all the time. I know it's an expensive thing to pay for, but not paying for it is worse.
Thank you. James Skoufis.
Thank you. And thank you, Myra. I'm coming from one of the other orange counties here in New York. Hello, and thanks most importantly for your work. Look, you know, this begins with reorienting in a major way away from the stale DC playbook that is run by DC consultants. And I'll give you an example. I spoke with a DNC member in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, actually a teacher herself, obviously a battleground state. And she explained to me in the heat of the campaign, she was getting upwards of 16 mailers a day, daily. I've run enough campaigns, I'm undefeated, 8-0, to know that there is nothing that 16th mailer is doing that the 15th mailer wasn't already doing. But the simple matter of fact is with every one of those mailers or TV ads that's cut, there's a 15 to 20% cut that's going to some friend of a congressman who has a vendor's contract that's ripping us off at the DNC. We've got to send that money to folks in the trenches like yourself who can organize and organize year-round and person-to-person, peer-to-peer, begin to rebuild that once grand coalition that we haven't seen in 16 years. 2008 was the last time we have dominated in a national election in this country as Democrats. And so the way we rebuild is first getting away from these consultants who are telling us to write off 43 out of 50 states every 4 years and telling us where to not show up. We've got to show up everywhere again.
Thank you. Nate Snyder.
First of all, thank you, Myra, for your service as a teacher. And thank you for sharing everything with that. I think this goes down to a bigger festering issue here. And while everybody's talking about messaging and tactics, while those are important, I think the biggest thing that we need to do as a party is to listen better. You know, I think for years and years, we have heard from locals, we have heard from working people about these issues. Not only that is the message not penetrating through, but we're saying the wrong thing, but even more importantly, that we're not showing up and we're not walking the walk. So I think, yes, business as usual, business to business. We don't need focus groups. We don't need consultants, and we don't need anything that's risk averse. I think we just need to have a better partnership with labor leaders here, with allies, to make sure that they have a voice at the table and they're in leadership roles so we can go straight to the source and we can talk directly to members about what concerns they have, what they are worried about, and what they want us to fight for. And I think if we go by that, we're going to find out we're going to be able to do a lot more. And yes, we need to make sure that we're updating our infrastructure to make sure that we're organizing in a 21st century way and need to really look at the failures of before we make things better. But I think the big thing here is we got to show up, we got to listen, we got to cut through the red tape, and we got to go straight to the source and go back to our roots. And once people see that, then you'll see traction, then you'll see a backbone, and that's how we can move forward.
Thank you. Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
Ms. Rivera, I'm so glad that there's an educator present for this forum. When I tell you I understand the fight of education, I am a teacher's teacher and administrator's administrator. When I tell you throughout the course of my educational career that runs from coast to coast, elementary to higher education, I have fought for fellow educators, raised my voice, even put my own career on the line several times for there to be greater engagement, for there to be alliances between educators and administrators so that teachers can have a greater voice in what they are actually planning and doing professional development in a way that is research-based, evidence-based. I'm just to the point that we need someone that's willing to fight on the behalf of education, that really wants to help frame the curriculum that looks like America, that is more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible to all people. When I tell you that there were so many times that my students, I call them my children too, that my students, their families, and people will come to me and say that there's a specific issue that's happening in school or lack of time for them to get their assignments done or whatever the case may be. I take the stress, I take the advocacy piece to the administration directly. We need someone that's going to be about the business, fighting on the behalf of education in the chairship as well as throughout the DNC.
Thank you. Martin O'Malley.
Thank you. Myra, thank you for your service. I love AFT. When I was mayor of Baltimore, AFT was our union. I worked with Loretta Johnson and many other courageous people going into the classroom every day and into our schools. I think we need to learn and lift up and learn from some of the people, younger leaders like your own Congressman, I'm guessing, Maxwell Frost, who are communicating with people. We need to communicate with people throughout the year before we ask for their vote. And technology, better technology, you know, and we can call it, in another context, it's called customer relations management. We need to know what people care about, what issues they care about, so we can communicate with them through the year. There was an editorial today in The Hill, and here's a quote that I tweeted out from it, which I think is insightful for this question. Going forward, cutting edge tech is going to be essential, not only in contacting voters, but more importantly, in listening to them. The DNC can shape this new future. There's been some talk in here in this forum about a war room. And yet I'm the only candidate that's actually set one of these up at every level. We need to harness human nature, create an every 2-week cadence communicate, meet people online, in communities online, and where they get their information. Thanks.
Thank you. Ben Wickler.
Thank you, Myra, and all the educators and support staff in our public schools. And the way that AFT and NEA have come together in Florida is a powerful example of unity. Democrats need to listen deeply to working people and speak clearly in ways that actually reach working people who have other things to do than watch MSNBC. And to do that, we need a permanent campaign. The Wisconsin model is to communicate and organize everywhere all the time. That's neighbor to neighbor and friend to friend in every zip code, in cities and suburbs, in rural areas and small towns. And it means communicating year round on every platform. And that means on local TV and in newspapers, and it means TikTok and YouTube and streaming and podcasts, in-game chats and group chats. It means amplifiers and influencer networks. It means tons of communicators. It means a chair, but also tons of other folks who are trained and networked with each other and can credibly and authentically talk to working people in their own communities. And what they talk about matters. They need to talk about the fights that show that the Republicans are the party of the ultra-rich who want to rig this entire country to help themselves and shut out everyone else. And that Democrats are the party that thinks that no matter what you look like or where you live, you deserve a family-supporting union job and you deserve an economy that works for you, not an economy where you're serving someone else. Wisconsin has been doing this work. We had the highest turnout in the country in the 2024 election. We're unrigging our state. We need to unrig this country. We need to unrig the economy. And to do that, we need to communicate in a way that actually connects with working folks so that we can win elections up and down the ballot.
Thank you. Marianne Williamson.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that we had a woman talking about teachers and we sort of somehow get off the question of teachers and children. And that is far too common in the American political classes. And I think in a way it's far too common in the Democratic Party. We have so many millions of children at risk in this country. We have millions of children who go to schools where there aren't even the resources to teach them to read by the age of 10. If a child cannot learn to read by the age of 10, the chances of high school graduation are drastically reduced and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. The teachers are, to me, the most important people in the United States professionally, and we should talk, among other things, about how they deserve more money. Now, there's a lot of talk here about how we need to go into all the 50 states and we need to go into the territories. We also need to deal with the issue that right now, all of the money, not only is all of the money practically kept with the consultancy class and a mere pittance given to all these states, this has to change on a radical level, a fundamental level. But it's not only that. We have to have the money for them to be able to hire all these people who are going out into these communities. So the next chair of the DNC is going to have to deal with that fundamental level. It can't be incremental change. It's wonderful that we're going to go out and talk to people, but we need to know that we will have a chair of the DNC who will face the fundamental problem. Also, the way it is now, all of the concentration of the DNC practically is on the presidential. We need to be there on local issues, especially with teachers, with parents, with children, local and state, all the time, and we need the money to do it.
Thank you. Ken Martin.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the question. And let me just say, we need to actually have union members out there talking to workers instead of celebrities. Who better to talk about education than a teacher, right? Who better to talk about hard work, getting up each and every day and having to go out and build affordable housing than a carpenter, right? I mean, the reality is we've got great messengers. We just don't use them. We keep relying on the same failed tactics. And we also have to realize that we have a major brand problem in this party. As you've heard me talking about, the perceptions of the two political parties has completely changed. This should have been the canary in the coal mine. Last year, when research showed that for the first time in modern history, the majority of Americans believe that the Republican Party best represents the interests of the working class and the poor, and the Democratic Party is a party of the wealthy and the elites. That is a damning indictment on our party and our party brand. We've got to get out there and focus again on a working class agenda. We are a big tent party. We are very diverse as it relates to race and ethnicity, to geography, to ideology. The one thing we know that connects all of the disparate groups within our party is economics. Everyone has a job. Everyone's working their asses off. Many of them feeling like they can't get ahead and achieve the American dream. They're falling behind and they feel like our party has forgotten them. This isn't rocket science, folks. We need to organize everywhere, use every communications channel we can, and give people who are working their tails off a sense that we care about them, their lives, their dreams, their hopes and aspirations. If we do that again, we'll win.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for your responses. Stuart, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Roxanne, and thank you all. We're now going to have a series of yes or no questions for each of you. You can just answer with one word, yes or no. And I'm going to ask Roxanne to ask the first question.
Thanks, Stuart. And some of you have already answered this question in different ways earlier, but the first question is, have you ever been a union member? And it goes to first person is Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
Yes, and presently.
Ken Martin,
Yes, proudly.
Martin O'Malley,
I had a SAG card for a short time.
Marianne Williamson,
No.
James Skoufis,
I had a SAG card for one day as an extra. Otherwise, I grew up in a union household.
I had a speaking part.
Nate Snyder,
Yes, I am, and proudly.
Jason Paul,
I am not. So no.
Ben Wickler.
Not yet.
Thank
The
you.
next question, I'm going to ask each of you, will you commit that the DNC will not hire vendors or consultants who also work on union busting campaigns?
Huh.
And let me go to James Skoufis first.
Absolutely, 1,000% yes.
Jason Paul,
Yes.
Ben Wickler,
Absolutely.
Dr. Quintessa Hathaway,
Yes, most definitely.
Nate Snyder,
Absolutely.
Martin O'Malley,
Yes.
Ken Martin,
Without a doubt, yes.
Marianne Williamson.
Loudly.
Wonderful. Next question. Will you accept donations from corporations that are actively involved in union busting? Martin O'Malley,
No.
Ben Wickler,
No.
Dr. Quintessa Hathaway,
No.
Marianne Williamson,
No.
Ken Martin,
No.
Nate Snyder,
Hell no.
Jason Paul,
No, but I probably wouldn't take any corporate money.
James Skoufis.
No, and I haven't taken corporate contributions for the past 3 cycles myself.
If elected, will you bargain with the DNC staff union in good faith on future contracts? Nate Snyder,
Absolutely. And if there's further organization, there would be neutrality.
Ken Martin,
Yes, I would voluntarily recognize any attempts to collectively bargain and include the ASDC staff in any union negotiation.
Jason Paul,
Yes.
Ben Wickler,
Absolutely, just as we've recognized our staff unions in Wisconsin.
Marianne Williamson,
Of course.
James Skoufis,
Yes, and ditto to Ken Martin, extending the opportunity to others, including the ASDC.
Dr. Quintessa Hathaway,
Yes, and I will work with the organization and mobilization effort as well.
Martin O'Malley,
Yes. I've always worked with organized labor.
Roxanne.
Wonderful. Now we'll begin our second short answer segment, and I'd like to call up Andre Washington from AFSCME and Sharia Smith from AFG to ask the next question. Andre?
Hello, everyone. I'm Andre Washington, and I am a proud union member of OPSI AFSCME Local 4 out of Columbus, Ohio. I work as special assistant to our executive director, Joseph Regola of the Ohio Association of Public School Employees. My fellow union members are 34,000 strong union members across the great state of Ohio. Our members serve as support staff, bus drivers, custodians, paraprofessional, secretary, food service, maintenance workers in public schools, libraries, and other public agencies in Ohio. Everyone in my family, from my grandparents down to my niece and nephew, are all union members. It is necessary that we bring the importance of having a strong union to the next generation, and we can only do this through thoughtful engagement with the DNC and union members, which is why Sharia and I want to ask the candidates questions tonight. My sister Sharia.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm Sharia Smith. I'm a proud union member in Dallas, Texas, a lawyer for the United States Department of Education, and president of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 252, which represents my almost 3,000 colleagues nationwide. My colleagues and I help fellow Americans obtain their educational goals, whether it's in the trades or in higher education. We also facilitate public service loan forgiveness to help Americans with educational loans or educational debt afford to work in public service. In short, we serve the public. But as I sit before you tonight, our jobs and the public service we provide are on the line because the incoming administration is threatening to eradicate our entire agency. We need a DNC party chair who will rally our base to hit home a message of understanding that the work that we do serves all Americans, no matter who they voted for or where they end up working. So our question tonight is, what would you do as chair to ensure that the Democratic National DNC treats labor as a true partner instead of just a funder or a source of money?
Thank you. We need a well-sustained engagement between unions and DNC staff and others in the party, particularly at the grassroots level.
And we'll start with, oh my gosh, Ken Martin.
Thank you so much. Look, a lot of people in DC want to win the argument. I actually want to win elections. And with families facing the impacts of the Trump agenda, we have a brief window to show that Democrats remain the party of the people. Winning isn't optional, it's imperative, and I know how to win. The one thing that should matter to Democrats right now is winning again. In Minnesota, we've demonstrated that labor isn't just a source of funding. It's a full-time thought partner in shaping our agenda. Through the DFL's coordinated campaign, labor leaders are integral to developing, implementing, and executing our electoral strategies. They're not just donors, they're decision makers in our state. And the reality is, under my leadership, we're 25-0 in statewide races. We've secured 2 trifectas. We've passed policies like minimum wage index to inflation, all-day kindergarten, paid family and medical leave, home health worker unionization, workplace safety protections, permitting reform, strengthening pensions, expanding prevailing wage and strong worker misclassification laws. We successfully beat back right to work attempts, banned captive audience meetings, outlawed unfair non-compete agreements, stopped local preemption, and are one of the few states that has seen growth in union households. The reality is, I want to bring this same model to the national party. We're going to scale it up with our national coordinated campaign table, which I just rolled out today, and make sure that unions aren't just giving money to the DNC. They are sitting at the table and helping to drive all of our strategies so we get workers back to the table, back to voting for Democrats again, and centering on a working class agenda.
Thank you. Marianne Williamson.
We cannot ask the working people of the United States to live their lives in a constant state of fight. We are going to overcome this terrible assault on our democracy and on the working people of the United States being presented by Donald Trump, not just by fighting, but by inspiring to people to know what they can have in their lives. And this is central to the Democratic project. Labor is essential to this because it is about standing for all of the things that Ken Martin was just saying. Too many Americans don't know that we stand for those things. So not only is it that every day we have to tell people, you need to know what Donald Trump is doing today, such as the things that Sharia mentioned, but we also need Americans to know this is what the Democrats were standing for today in the House and in the Senate and in Minnesota and in Florida and in Texas and in California. Sometimes it's as though the Republicans don't walk their talk, but we don't talk our walk. And I will be out there talking it. We will be out there when there is a strike somewhere. I don't care if it's mental health workers, medical workers, ski patrollers, wherever it is. We're going to be there. We're going to have people on the ground. We're going to have people who care to help the Democratic Party again, because they will know that we are having their back. We are with them. And we're going to get this thing done. But we're going to do it because we have passion in our gut, and we're going to inspire American people to be part of American history and to take this country back to what Abraham Lincoln called a new birth of freedom.
Thank you. Nate Snyder.
Thank you. I think this is something that I have a unique perspective on, except for probably one person here, having gone into an administration to where the Trump administration had demolished and essentially just ripped to shreds our institutions that we hold dear. And so I am understanding of the damage here. And one of the reasons I jumped in is obviously to be a crisis manager, having worked in national security at the highest stakes. I would say this isn't just a working people problem or a labor problem. This is an American problem. These are issues that are going to hit not just labor, but all the various caucuses and councils throughout the DNC. And so obviously labor would be at the forefront on leading the charge, not only informing what that looks like in true partnership with the DNC, but the DNC also needs to be accountable on mobilizing everybody else to come to this cause, making sure that we are hitting everybody in various other communities, making sure that they understand the perils that we are facing, and making sure that we are using everything under our funders and everything else, whether it's new technology, whether it's putting young people in leadership positions who understand the environment much better than we all do here now to lead that charge. And so it's not just one particular issue, it's an issue for all. And I think it is definitely a crisis that we need somebody to wade through, and that's what I would intend to do.
Thank you. Jason Paul.
So what I would do is find a way to look at seeing which Democrats are willing to forego getting their COPE fact checks so that that money can be thrown back into direct union member to member communication. Because there are a lot of money that unions spend on Democrats for Democrats is then used for those TV ads, for things we want to do, and is not used to have workers talk to workers. I'd like to find a way that you can say, look, we love you just as much, whether you write that COPE check or you don't write that COPE check. And another thing that I would want to think seriously about is that the organizers that I would have would absolutely be willing to engage labor and help them with the things they need, because there's another pair of hands around whose full-time job it is to make democracy work better, to make the party work better, and to make labor work better. And so if there's another person who, can just, even if you want to do an event, can go and grab bottled water for it, something very granular like that. I think if we have those kinds of people who can help, and then we say, take the money that you were spending on the programs that we want to do and go back to spending it on members, that's a partnership. That's better than what we currently have.
Thank you. Ben Wickler.
Thank you. Unions have been at the front lines of every great economic and civil rights fight going back generations, even when the Democratic Party hasn't been. So getting this right means listening to unions and working people as a moral North Star for this party and for this country. And that means building structures within the Democratic Party to ensure that unions are more than just a funder. That starts with being on the hiring committee for the DNC's executive director and figuring out who should fill top staffing positions together. That means regular meetings at every level of our organizations and building our strategic plans together. It means not just a 50-state or 57-state party strategy. It means 57 strategies in each state and state party that unions help to craft and to implement, where we understand each of our capacities and the work that we can do together to fulfill our shared plans over a 10-year horizon. Because this fight is not one and done. This is not about getting right what we got wrong last time. This is about building a country together that works for working people. And it means day-to-day solidarity in fights that come up unexpectedly or that are the fruit of years of planning, like the Social Security Fairness Act that just got signed into law, and congratulations on that. It means a labor education program developed with unions to train Democratic Party staff and campaign staffers and candidates so that they know how to live up to our party's values and partner with the labor movement in their work, both when they run for office and when they are in office. It means working with union vendors. It means living out our values, fighting the fight, and talking the talk, and doing the work.
Thank you. Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
It breaks my heart to know that the president-elect will be inaugurated on January 20th, on the same day that is celebrated for one of the strongest labor leaders to ever live in the 20th century, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I cannot emphasize enough that it is going to be necessary for us as a party to bring the labor movement, those that are involved in this labor activity, to the table. What that could potentially look like is setting quotas for not only labor leadership, but as well as the youth to sit on the various subcommittees and councils and caucuses so that their ideas, their attitudes, their beliefs become ingrained in the party platform. Also, the American labor movement has a history of radical progressive change that has looked like overtime pay. It brought about child labor laws, minimum wage, workers' rights. It brought about workplace safety, formulated unions, and it continues to challenge us to move earnings upward and empower people forward. What that also looks like is having everyone, build this coalition so that all voices are heard.
Thank you. Martin O'Malley.
Yeah, this is one where I really wish I had more time than 1 minute and 30 seconds. So, I would disagree with the assertion I made earlier. This actually is about figuring out what we did wrong and figuring out how to do it right the next time so we can win elections. And the figuring of that out is going to require the essential voice of labor, the experience of labor. So we need to recruit more candidates from labor to run for office, not down the ballot, but all across the ballot. We need labor's feedback in terms of message and tactics and what works and what doesn't work so that we can improve upon that every 2 weeks, not once a year. It's not about having meetings for meeting's sake. And it's about looking at the data, looking at the evidence of what works so that we can do more of it. I would encourage you, Mr. Washington, good seeing you again. And I would encourage you, Ms. Smith, to talk to your brothers and sisters at AFGE. I was there at the bill signing of the Social Security Fairness Act. And the reason that I was there and the reason the president invited me there was because he sent me to Social Security to turn it around, because he knows that I am one of the best operational turnaround leaders in our party today. And the hardworking men and women of AFGE did turn it around. And they can tell you, we met all the time, every 2 weeks in order to figure out what works and to do more of it.
Thank you. James Skoufis.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Smith and Andre, for the question. It was great to meet you last month, Andre, and sit down and spend some time with you. Look, it's not just funding. I'm sick and tired of our National Democratic Party more broadly taking for granted our friends in organized labor. A few weeks before the election, frantically calling folks if we need some door knockers, frantically calling folks if we need some warm bodies behind a podium at a rally. Again, I want the next DNC, the iteration of our National Democratic Party, ought to be having our friends in organized labor in the room making decisions with us. What does that look like if I'm chair? I don't just want labor on the hiring committee of the executive director. I want the next executive director to come from organized labor. I want new partnerships between the DNC and organized labor, whereby off cycle, we are using DNC dollars, whether it's direct or through super PACs, to organize workplaces off cycle so that on cycle, we have larger membership roles to pull from and help our candidates electorally. I want the labor coalition staff director to be exclusively full-time and focused on coalition building for labor with, in conjunction, the Labor Council. Right now, they're split between multiple roles. And I want, and I think Ken Martin mentioned this, I want organized labor, our leaders in the working class, to be the most common face on TV, the most common validator talking to the public. I want the next DNC, the next National Democratic Party, to be organized labor, and the public needs to see that.
Thank you all. Next, I'd like to bring on someone from my own union, Shane Forbes, to ask our next and final question of the evening. Shane.
Hello, tonight from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, I'm Shane Forbes, president of the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union, UFCW Local 110. And I work on the factory floor at Quaker Oats. We also represent workers at General Mills across town and Kohl's Quality Foods in North Liberty. We are America's heartland of workers. Sadly, many of our members voted for Trump. I've talked with many of my coworkers until I'm blue in the face about what this administration did for us, but I can't do it alone. The message isn't being reached by workers in the factory in Iowa, and we need your help. Speaking with us about tangible things that impact us regularly that could change that. Our question for you tonight is, what would you do to ensure that labor disputes such as strikes, contract negotiations, receive support from the party and Democratic leaders?
And we're going to call on Martin O'Malley to answer first.
Hey, Shane, good to see you, and been to Cedar Rapids many times. I have a long history of helping labor, and in fact, I remember very distinctly actually picketing the University of Maryland Hospital along with SEIU, and I do believe AFSCME, if memory serves me correctly. Look, the truth is that labor is the engine of American progress. In fact, were it not for labor, there would be no economy. So I believe the Democratic Party, as the party of labor, the party of working people, needs to stand up and get involved when workers are being worked over by people who think profit's a lot more important than people. That's the person I have always been. And I believe that the Democratic Party can't remain silent, can't act like well, we might offend a CEO here or there if we stand up for people everywhere. We need to stand up for people everywhere. As I said before, our economy is not money, it's people. And as a party, we need to act like it. We need to speak up on behalf of workers. And we also need to be out there when workers have to take action in order to get a fair shake from their employers. We need, on the other side of these dark 2 years, as we fight against Donald Trump, we need a new Bill of Rights for American workers in the 21st century.
Ben Wickler.
Shane, thank you. The essential question is, whose side are you on? And the Democratic Party should be crystal clear that we're on the side of working people. Strike is not a dirty word. It's an exercise of power, and the bosses who don't negotiate in good faith and bring the strikes upon themselves, they are exercising power themselves. So that means as a Democratic Party, we need to walk the picket line and organize candidates and staff to be able to do so. That means that we need to be able to pick up the phone if we have a relationship to make sure that that folks are hearing that the Democratic Party will not back down in solidarity with the folks that are putting their own lives and livelihoods on the line to ensure that working people get a fair shake. It means that how we communicate, how our surrogates communicate, the talking points that we send out to folks, what we do with our war rooms, where we show up, all reflects the fight of working people to ensure that they get a fair shake and that they get contracts that recognize their hard work and what they have earned. As a Democratic Party, the way that we will earn trust from people is by solidarity. It is by actually showing up when the chips are down. I think people remember who's with them when they're in a fight. And the Democratic Party needs to be ready to fight in ways that people can see and feel and hear. If we want to build the muscle memory of solidarity, we need to practice every single day. And that's my commitment if I'm the DNC chair.
Marianne Williamson.
When I was younger, the Democratic Party seemed to have far more spine. We were the unequivocal advocates for the working people of the United States. Sometimes it seems to me that the elite of the Democratic Party have failed to understand how much suffering there is out there. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. We have over 1 million people who are rationing their insulin. 70% of Americans say they live with constant economic anxiety. We have people in this country who are selling their blood plasma. We have 70 to 90 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. This is what corporate tyranny has done to us. There is no pushing back against that without labor. The relationship between the Democratic Party and organized labor must be airtight. There was a time when I was growing up when it was. Today, the Democratic Party is a little too equivocal sometimes. We come across like, yeah, we want to help people, and we want to stand for the things that unions want. However, we don't want to go so far that we might offend the donor class. Those days must be over, and the DNC must be the primary statement for that, to inspire the American people to know that between the Democratic Party and organized labor, their dreams can come true. Their children can get educated. Their families can get health care. They can have economic opportunity. They can have dignity in the workplace. But we're going to stand for this with much more spine than we've been showing over the last few decades, and then we'll get it done.
Nate Snyder.
Thank you. I agree with most of what's being said, but I keep on hearing buzzwords here. And that's not getting to the root of the problem. I think I uniquely have been in position, not only contract negotiations, but I would add in organizing drives. Too many times as an organizer, I would go to my local assembly or I go to my local legislator and I'd say, sir or ma'am, we need your help. We need you to help protect the workers as they form their union. We need your help to leverage to make sure that they win their contract and they get the wages and benefits that they deserve for their hard work and the respect on the job. And so many times I was told, hey kid, come back, let us know how it goes, and then maybe we'll show up. Well, as DNC chair, I'll work with labor. I'll make sure there's accountability. I don't think that's been really said here. There needs to be a new level of accountability, not only with the DNC, but also Democrats abroad, that if you say you're with working families, you show up for working families. And there should also be incentives, whether it comes down to funding, whether it comes down to staff, and various other things. I was really glad to hear that we're all on the same page in regards to not receiving money from union busters or corporates who have nefarious ideas. And I think we need to stick to that, but we also need to live by it. So I think that's a big thing, accountability here and making sure that we show up when it's needed.
Ken Martin.
Thank you so much for the question. And let me just say that part of the challenge again is people are frustrated and mad because they keep hearing the same thing over and over again from both political parties. And yeah, it's great. We do need to be in solidarity, as Ben said. We do need to stand up at the picket lines and show up for labor because they show up for us, but we need to show up for workers as well. And what I mean by that is people are sick and tired of getting people elected to office and see those people see the first decision that they make on any one of these issues is through their own self-interested lens of getting reelected. You see, in Minnesota, what we did with the 1-seat majority in the last trifecta is said, we're going to use the power we have when we have it to make the biggest difference for as many people as we can. And what we did is we focused on agenda of the struggles of everyday working Minnesotans. And that's what we passed. And so half the battle is showing up for sure, but the other half of the battle is doing something when you have the power to do it. And that's what we need to do. And I agree with Nate. We need to hold people accountable. We need to hold Democrats accountable just as much as we hold Republicans accountable. You can't say you're pro-labor and when you get into office, do nothing to actually focus on an agenda that's going to lift up workers' voices. When I'm DNC chair, and that's when I'm DNC chair, you can take it to the bank. We're going to deliver for working people, and we're going to hold Democrats and Republicans equally accountable to delivering for them as well.
James Skoufis.
Thank you. And thank you for the question, Shane. If there's one issue I'm known for in New York state government, it's taking on corporate welfare. And to the point that's been made a couple of times, you can't have it both ways. You can't be on both sides. You can't be for working people and be for corporate elites. And so we have to signal, not just during those times when there's a picket, when there's a contract dispute. And yes, certainly as DNC chair, I would look to, as I've done as an elected official, bring the full bear of pressure and shame to bad acting corporate interests when there are labor disputes, when there are contract disputes, yes. But if it was as simple as showing up on a picket line, I think the election result would have been very different 8 weeks ago when we had the first president in history show up on a picket line for UAW. So it's not that simple. We have to, as a party, not just show up at those sort of episodic moments. We have to show up year round. Shane, we've got to go to your factory floor as both elected officials and party officials and lean into hard conversations, because that trust has frayed, not just over the past year, the past election cycle. It's been fraying for years and years and years. And we've got to go to those factory floors, just as I, every couple of years, have a big town hall with the carpenters union, a couple hundred carpenters. Yeah, they ask me some questions about wage theft and corporate welfare. They also ask me about guns and abortion and the transgender conversation. And we can't be running away from these tough conversations any longer. We've got to be meaningfully engaging workers where they are. That's what we'll do as the next Democratic Party.
Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
There's a portion of the conversation that I believe is being missed. When it comes to contract awards, that is a way for the economic opportunity and wealth gap to be able to shrink. There are sectors of this country, primarily in the private sector, where there are not enough contracts being awarded, state or federal, to minorities, women, and people of color throughout this country. That is how many, during the industrial period, have been able to pull themselves literally up by their bootstraps to be able to equalize their opportunities. So we're not doing enough of that. Also, I took some notes. Y'all know I'm a teacher. We have to use our think tanks to craft legislation that will be introduced by Democrats that directly impact the labor council as well as its leadership. If we are not on the side of not only having conversation, but crafting the legislation and having those components passed, we're going to continue to be at a disadvantage.
Jason Paul.
So I guess I think about this differently, because I absolutely want to get party and Democratic leaders to support unions during contract disputes and strikes and those issues. But what would really make a difference is if we could get Democrats, the 20 million Democrats who vote in low turnout primaries or give Democratic candidates, to do the same. Because if the customers of those companies are unhappy because of the way they're treating their workers, then that's when they'll feel it, and that's when they're more likely to cave. And so that if we could get the regular, ordinary Democrat to do that, then we would really be able to utilize our power. But right now, we can't utilize that power because the Democratic Party has no means of communication to the average Democrat. Because if you send so many emails, you can't say an email, hey, look, we really need to be boycotting Starbucks this week because they're not negotiating in good faith, or Amazon did this, or Amazon did that. We can't communicate because everyone's means of communications for the Democratic Party is flooded with solicitations for cash. And if you're flooded with solicitations for cash, you can't communicate effectively. If you can't communicate, that's true on all the party things, but it's also true on the labor things. We are stuck in a communications rut. And that is why we can't help on something like this, even though our leaders should when the opportunity presents itself.
And now we're going to turn to the final part of the program this evening, which is asking each of our candidates for a 1-minute statement And we're going to start with Ben Wickler.
In this moment, unions are the voice of working people. And I'm running for DNC chair, fully aware that the 89% of workers who are not yet in a union trust unions more than they trust Democrats. The Biden-Harris administration has been the most pro-worker, pro-union administration in my lifetime, and they were exactly right to take that view. If they hadn't been, this election would have gone far worse. And the far-right billionaires and their politician pawns, they know it too. That's why they've been targeting unions for decades, and the threats are even greater in this moment. Trump and Elon Musk cackle about firing striking workers and crushing unions left and right. The Democratic Party needs a strong union movement with millions more members. The union movement is stronger when there's a strong pro-worker Democratic Party, and this country needs the union movement and the Democratic Party to be in this fight together to make a difference in working people's lives. The far-right oligarchs are trying to crush us both. Let's come together. I would be honored for your endorsement for DNC chair, and I'd be honored to be able to work with you to make a difference by winning elections and delivering for working people in this country.
Martin O'Malley.
Thank you, and thank you for having this forum. Am I on? Yes? Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having this forum. The choice before all of you right now from many of the fine candidates that are offering their candidacies is really this. Which among us actually has a proven record of getting things done in solidarity with labor, doing things in office that advance the labor agenda, and actually executing, getting things done, being a change agent. We are in an extremely challenging time. The billionaire boys and Donald Trump are going to break a lot of things that a lot of Americans thought could never be broken. We need a chair who can take on Donald Trump from day one. This is a wartime footing chair that we are about to elect. This is no time for those who would say that this is a caretaker time. We just need to do a little more of what we were doing before. No, we need to make the changes necessary to win. And I have a track record of doing that with labor at every level. And that's what we're going to do in these next 2 years.
Ken Martin.
Thank you so much, Stuart, Roxanne, and again, President Schuler. Look, folks, I think what our party needs right now is a workhorse, not a show horse. I have a vision for this party and have already created programs and investments to expand our map nationally. I believe every other candidate in this race has backed a version of the 57 state party strategy that I wrote. Now, look, we need to turbocharge my plan to compete everywhere, every year, and every election. That starts now with this year's elections, and it continues next year when, under my leadership, we take back Congress. Every year we talk about contesting more races in redder places and flipping states. I will do that. We have to go after emerging targets and skate to where the puck will be, not where the puck is, as we say in Minnesota. If you want a creature of Washington as our next party chair, or the favorite of the donor class who will funnel money into their rich consultant friends with the same old tired ideas, that's not me. But if you want a DNC chair who's already brought labor in as full thought partners, who will roll up his sleeves to help win special elections in Virginia, I was just knocking doors there on Saturday, or a chair who will join snowy picket lines in Minnesota, then yeah, I'm your guy. Thank you.
Dr. Quintessa Hathaway.
We have a great decision to make in less than 1 month as we as a party prepare to select our DNC chair. Today, I rolled out from my website as I formally announced my candidacy for the chairship along the lines of a plan for us as a party to chart new avenues forward. What that looks like is a 57-state U.S. territory strategy. 1. 2, data-driven, research-based, and targeted messaging and marketing. The passage of the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act and Freedom to Vote Act. It is also going to require us to be involved in litigation. I've seen, even as I wrote my own amicus brief, that the DNC is not participating when it comes to racial and partisan gerrymandering cases. Democrats are retaking the South. The South is the epicenter of the civil rights movement. I cannot lean in on that enough to say if we go back and win back the South, that will be critical. Also, there has to be a youth movement that is ignited in this country, as well as we need to prepare for the 2030 census and reapportionment as well. Thank you.
James Skoufis.
First and foremost, my thanks again to the Labor Council and all union members for the important forum tonight. You all heard from candidates who care deeply about the union movement clearly. The questions that every DNC member has to ask, however, are these. Are we going to continue to just tweak around the edges? Are we going to go with someone who cares more about spinning than winning? Or are we going to go try and do something differently? Go with an undefeated candidate who wins in deep red territory with strong working class support. Someone that'll be able to tell the DC consultant class the gravy train is over. And there's only one candidate who's uniquely positioned to do that, and it's why I'm running. Together, we'll transform the DNC and make organized labor the face of this party again. Most importantly, we'll reassemble the coalition we haven't built since 2008, 16 years ago. I'd be honored to earn your support in this race, and let's start winning again together.
Jason Paul.
So first, I want to thank you all for listening to me. Second of all, I'm just going to try and sum up how this forum went. I answered the questions. I said how. I spoke about what exactly we're going to do. And a lot of these ending statements ended up being sort of snipey and nasty from some of the other candidates. People talk about a 57-state strategy. I want it to be an every state strategy because I want the language we use to be reflective of our ability to speak to the 20 million people who want to be Democrats who've never heard of what the ASDCA is. And so if we're going to really bring the people into this party, we have to find a way to speak like that. And we have to not find an opportunity to sort of take shots at who's done what and which consulting class is this. And that tone has not been good. That's why I'm running, because we need the ideas to take center stage, not us. It's not about why me, it's about what we can do. And that's why I'm running.
Marianne Williamson.
Actually, I think everybody did really well here. Let me just say this. When Abraham Lincoln stood on the battlefield at Gettysburg, he said that the men who died there had fought so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. He would be so horrified today because it's perishing now. We have become a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. This cannot be transformed without organized labor. Organized labor and Democrats must work together. But we do need more than workhorses, and I'll tell you why. It has been obvious here today. We have the best workhorses, but I know I've been on the picket line with the UAW workers in Detroit. I've been on the picket line in Los Angeles with the actors and the writers. I've had podcasts where I've brought on those kids who were the graduate students at University of Michigan who were selling their blood plasma because they couldn't get a contract. I have done the same with the kids who were trying to unionize at Starbucks. And you know what? They didn't just thank me for organizing, they thanked me for caring. So I think that is an important part that the Democratic Party needs now. We need a lot of head, but we need a lot of heart as well. And that should not be diminished because it's one of the big reasons that we lost. Thank you.
Nate Snyder.
Thank you to the Labor Council for hosting this. It's been a great discussion. First, I came into this race as a crisis manager. I'd led many efforts to respond to crises across the country. And that's really what we're in now as a party and also as a labor movement as a whole. We are seeing vote shares get lost where we have healthy unions and healthy democratic structures. And so I am taking that mentality to this. Not only one thing of just talking about labor and how we're all impassioned about it, but I want to speak to the 1,700 folks who are out there. As DNC chair, I want to unlock the potential of allies in the labor movement, not only to come to the table, but help lead the charge. And so I think with that new coalition that we need to imagine, rebuild, we are going to make some headway and make sure that those who need to be held accountable are held accountable. So I thank you everybody for your time, and I'm really hoping that I can talk to many in the weeks to come. Please check me out at natefordnc.com. Thanks.
I want to thank all our candidates for what has been an informative event. former chair of the party, texted me during the event telling me that this was an impactful forum, and I couldn't agree more. All of the candidates have given us, and all the people who are listening on this call, a lot to think about. And there have been a lot of people listening in on this call. The forum may be ending, but renewing the relationship between working people and the Democratic Party is a crucial and ongoing conversation that has to keep going on. Tonight's forum is an important step in setting the future of our party so that we can once again set the future for our nation. And I want to thank you all. I want to thank everyone who participated tonight, either asking questions, answering questions, or listening in. Everyone, stay well.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good
Thanks
night,
so
all.
much, Stuart. See you.